Lucas had never imagined that a simple diplomatic mission would lead to something so strange. He was a soldier, sent to the Zorathian homeworld as part of an important peace effort between Earth and the Zorathians. Humans had only recently made contact with the Zorathians, a powerful and mysterious race that had been watching Earth for centuries. They had invited humans to join their galactic council, but there were still many secrets to uncover. The ship carrying Lucas and his team landed softly on the Zorothian capital, a sprawling city with towering buildings that stretched far into the sky. The air smelled different, here strange, yet not unpleasant. The streets were filled with alien beings, some walking on two legs, while others floated or hovered on platforms. Every building seemed to pulse with energy, and the people moved with an air of quiet dignity, as though they were waiting for something. Lucas adjusted the black uniform of his military rank. He wasn't used to being in a peaceful environment. Like this, on Earth, soldiers were used to danger, to fighting for survival. But here it felt different. He had a mission, sure, but he didn't know what he was really walking into. The Zorothians had kept much of their history and their motives secret from the human delegation, and Lucas had his doubts. What was their real goal? Why had they invited humans into their world? There were too many questions. The delegation led Lucas and his team through the streets, heading towards a grand hall in the center of the city. The air grew cooler as they approached. Inside the hall, the atmosphere was heavy with silence. Alien leaders stood in a circle, waiting for the human ambassadors to arrive. At the center of the room was an ancient symbol, glowing softly with light. Lucas's eyes wandered over to it, curious about its meaning. He had never seen anything like it before. As he entered the hall, Lucas's attention was suddenly caught by a figure standing by the side. She was tall, her posture graceful, and her eyes. They seemed to shine with a curiosity that immediately captured his attention. She wasn't like the others. She had a soft beauty, unlike anything he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered with a strange soft light, and her long hair flowed like silk. She wore elegant robes that seemed to shift colors as they moved. When their eyes met, Lucas felt something stir within him, a connection he couldn't explain. The woman's eyes never left him. She seemed to study him, as if she was searching for something deep inside him. It was a strange feeling, but Lucas couldn't. "Look away, then." She moved toward him, her steps quiet, yet purposeful. As she reached him, the room seemed to pause. Time itself felt like it had slowed. She stopped in front of him, and Lucas could feel her presence, powerful and gentle all at once. Without a word, she reached up, gently tracing her fingers over his arm, where the symbol was tattooed. The symbol was old, passed down through generations of humans who had survived a war no one else remembered. It marked those who had carried the burden of protecting Earth against forces no one else had ever known. Lucas had never thought much of it before, but standing here now, he realized it meant something to her. She stepped closer, her eyes still locked onto his. For a moment, Lucas was speechless. But then, without warning, she leaned in, her lips pressing softly against his. The kiss was gentle, yet there was an intensity behind it that Lucas couldn't ignore. He stood frozen for a moment, his mind racing. What had just happened? Had she kissed him? The room seemed to fall away, and the only thing that existed was the warmth of her touch, the soft pressure of her lips against his. When she pulled back, her eyes were filled with something Lucas couldn't quite place. Her expression was a mix of wonder and uncertainty, as though she had just discovered something important about him. "I'm sorry," she said softly, her voice like a melody, her words flowing smoothly in the human tongue. "I didn't mean to startle you." Lucas blinked, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. "It's okay," he managed to say, his voice coming out more hoarse than he'd intended. The woman studied him for a moment, her gaze softening. "The symbol on your arm," she said quietly, almost to herself. "It means something to my people. It's a sign. A sign of a bond that was once forged, a bond that must be renewed." Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. "A bond?" he asked, confused. What was she talking about? Before she could respond, the Zorothian leaders stepped forward, their expressions stern. "The council awaits your report, human." one of them said. His tone was distant, formal. Kayla, as the woman was called, didn't seem to hear them. She was still staring at the symbol on Lucas's arm, her eyes wide. There was something deeply personal in her gaze, something that felt ancient and meaningful. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but closed it again, choosing silence. "Follow us," the Zorathian leader urged, but Kayla didn't move. She continued to gaze at Lucas, a soft look on her face. As Lucas followed the council, his mind was racing. What was the significance of the symbol? Why had Kayla kissed him? There was a history here, a past he knew nothing about, and he felt that he was just beginning to understand the tip of the iceberg. But one thing was clear, this was no ordinary diplomatic mission. The future of humanity might depend on it. Lucas sat in the grand hall, his mind racing. The kiss from Kayla still lingered on his lips, and her words echoed in his mind. The symbol on your arm, it means something to my people. What did it all mean? Why was this alien woman so captivated by a simple symbol? Something he had never given much thought to before. The council meeting had begun, but Lucas couldn't focus on the discussions. The Zorathian leaders spoke in a language he didn't fully understand, their voices deep and commanding. Kayla stood quietly beside him, her gaze never leaving him, as though she was waiting for him to make sense of it all. Finally, after what felt like hours, the meeting came to an end. Lucas rose from his seat, feeling both confused and intrigued. He turned to Kayla, who still seemed lost in her thoughts. "I need to know more," Lucas said, his voice steady. "What does this symbol mean, and why did you kiss me?" He couldn't help but ask. There was a part of him that wanted to understand her reaction, but another part of him was unsure if he was ready to know the truth. Kayla hesitated, her eyes softening as she looked at him. "The symbol on your arm is more than just an insignia," she began, her voice calm. "It represents an ancient bond between my people and yours. Long ago, Earth and the Zorathians were allies. We fought a terrible war together, an enemy so fierce that neither race could have survived alone." Lucas listened carefully, trying to piece together the fragments of the past that Kayla was revealing. "I'd always thought of Earth as a relatively isolated planet in the galaxy, with few allies and many enemies. He never imagined that humans had once fought alongside the Zorathians, let alone shared a bond so deep that it left a lasting mark." "The war you speak of?" Lucas asked, his curiosity growing. "Who were we fighting? What happened to that alliance?" Kayla's expression grew darker, and she looked away for a moment. "The enemy was called the Kresh, a ruthless, brutal species bent on destruction. It nearly wiped us out, and the alliance was our only hope. But after the war, the Zorathians changed. We grew fearful of the human strength. We decided to cut ties and erase all memory of the alliance, thinking that it was the only way to protect ourselves." Lucas could feel the weight of her words. To think that Earth and the Zorathians had once been so closely connected, only for their relationship to be severed for fear of human power, he couldn't understand how something so important could be forgotten, erased from history as if it had never happened. "So you've been waiting for someone with this symbol?" Lucas asked, looking down at his arm. "Waiting for me?" Kayla nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a mix of regret and hope. "Yes. The symbol is a sign not just of the past, but of the future. The people believe that the return of the symbol means that the bond can be renewed. The Kresh are not gone, Lucas. They are still out there, and they are gathering their strength. The alliance between our races must be rebuilt, or the Kresh will destroy us all." Lucas stared at her, his mind spinning. The peace he had hoped for on this mission felt fragile, like a thin thread that could snap at any moment. The Kresh were still out there, and humanity was the key to stopping them. His role in all of this seemed clear now. He wasn't just a soldier sent to broker peace. He was a part of something much larger than he had ever imagined. But why? "Me?" he asked. "Why is this symbol on my arm? I don't understand why I was chosen." Kayla took a deep breath and looked at him with a mixture of sadness and admiration. "The symbol is not something that can be earned. It is passed down to those who are born to carry it. You, Lucas, are part of a very small group of humans who are connected to the original alliance. You are the last of the legacy. Lucas felt a strange sense of pride mixed with disbelief. He was part of something much older than he had ever known. But there was still so much he didn't understand. Why had his people been chosen to carry this burden? And why had the Zorathians cut ties with humanity after the war? As Kayla continued to explain the ancient history, Lucas felt a sense of purpose awakening inside him. The galaxy was much larger, much more complicated than he had ever imagined. And yet in this moment, he knew that his role was more important than ever. He stood up, his mind set on the next step. We can't let the Kresh win. We need to rebuild the Alliance. We need to do it now. Kella's eyes sparkled with a mixture of hope and determination.
Yes.
That's why I'm here, Lucas. We are the bridge between our two races. Together we can stop the Kresh before they destroy everything we hold dear. For the first time since arriving on the Zorathian world, Lucas felt a spark of hope. The weight of the past had been heavy on his shoulders, but now he understood the significance of the symbol on his arm. It wasn't just a mark of humanity's past, it was a beacon for the future. The Alliance could be restored, and together they would face the Kresh. The days after the council meeting were filled with preparation. Lucas and Kayla worked together to uncover the secrets of the past, piecing together the history of the ancient Alliance. It wasn't easy. The Zorathians were reluctant to share much about their past, and many records were hidden or destroyed. But Kayla was determined. She was the key to unlocking the truth. And Lucas could feel the urgency in her every word. They spent hours searching through old archives, dusty books, and ancient scrolls, trying to understand what had happened to Earth and the Zorathians. So, long ago, the more they uncovered, the more Lucas realized how little humanity knew about its own past. The war with the Kresh had been a dark chapter in their history, and most people on Earth had no idea it had ever happened. As Kayla flipped through a thick tome, her fingers tracing the ancient symbols, she stopped suddenly. Here, she whispered. This is it. Lucas leaned in, his heart pounding. The page she had opened was covered with old Zorothian script. But there were also familiar symbols, human symbols, ones he recognized from his childhood. This is Earth's symbol, Lucas said, pointing at the markings. But why is it here? Kayla studied the page carefully, her expression serious. These symbols were used by both our peoples. They were part of the peace treaty. That ended the war with the Kresh. But something went wrong. It's very wrong. She turned the page, revealing a map of the galaxy. It was old, faded, but Lucas could make out the shape of Earth and the Zorothian homeworld. But there was something else. In the far corner of the map, there was a dark, empty space. It was labeled only as the Forgotten Sector. Kella's finger traced the edges of the empty region. This is where the Kresh came from, she said softly. No one knows exactly what happened to them, but they disappeared after the war, or so we thought. Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. The Forgotten Sector. It was a place no one dared to explore, a dark spot on the map that had been ignored for centuries. But now, it seemed that the Kresh had never really left. They had only been waiting, rebuilding their forces in secret. So what happened after the war? Lucas asked, his voice low. Kayla closed the book gently, her eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and regret. After the war, the Zorathians made a decision. They feared the humans were too strong, too unpredictable. They believed that if the Alliance continued, it would lead to more wars. So they cut ties with Earth and erased all records of our partnership. They wanted to forget the past. Lucas stared at her, shocked by what she was saying. But why? Why erase everything? The Zorathians believed that by severing the bond, they could avoid another conflict. They thought they were protecting their people. But in doing so, they condemned Earth to face the Kresh alone, without any allies. It was a mistake. Lucas thought about Earth's history. He had always been taught that humanity was alone in the galaxy, that Earth was a small, isolated planet. But now, it felt as if everything he had known was wrong. His people had been part of something much larger, something forgotten by time. We We're never meant to be forgotten, Kayla said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. Your people are the key to our survival. The bond must be restored. Lucas nodded slowly. The weight of their shared history pressed down on him. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was part of something greater, something that could change the course of the future. But how do we restore the bond? Lucas asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. How do we stop the Kresh? Kayla stood up, her gaze firm. We need to unite our people once more. The Zorathians must remember their past, and Earth must understand the truth of what happened. The Kresh are still out there, growing stronger, but together we can defeat them. Lucas felt a surge of determination that he had always believed in, fighting for what was right. But now, this mission had become personal. It wasn't just about Earth's survival, it was about restoring an ancient bond. It's about rebuilding a connection that had been lost for centuries. The Kresh can't be allowed to take control of the galaxy, Lucas said, standing alongside Kayla. We'll stop them together. Kayla's eyes softened. We are stronger together, Lucas. The bond between our peoples was never truly broken. It just needs to be remembered. They spent the rest of the day planning their next steps. They would need to gather support from the Zorathian leaders, convince them to face the truth of their past, and then they would have to reach out to Earth. Lucas knew it wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance, both from the Zorathians and from his own people.
How?
Many would still believe that the past should remain buried. But Lucas was no longer the soldier he had been when he first landed on the Zorathian world. He had a purpose now, and with Kayla by his side, he knew they could accomplish the impossible. As the sun set over the Zorathian capital, Lucas and Kayla stood together, gazing out at the horizon. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear together. They would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The war was coming and they had to be ready. The days following their discovery in the archives were filled with preparations. Lucas and Kayla worked tirelessly, traveling from one Zorothian city to another, gathering support for their cause. The Zorothian leaders were hesitant, unsure of whether to trust Kayla's claims about the past. Many of them believed that Earth had become too distant and that the alliance should remain a memory. But Lucas knew they couldn't afford to wait. The Kresh were out there, growing stronger, and time was running out. Every moment wasted could mean the difference between life and death for both their people. Kayla's belief in the prophecy was growing stronger, and Lucas found himself believing in it too. The bond between Earth and the Zorothians had been broken, but it could still be restored. They arrived at a grand hall in one of the oldest Zorothian cities, where the leaders had agreed to meet. The room was filled with statues and ancient symbols, a reminder of the history that had been lost. Lucas could feel the weight of the moment. This was where it would all come together. This was where they would convince the Zorothians to join Earth in the fight against the Crest. As they entered the hall, their expressions unreadable. Kayla stepped forward, her voice strong. We have come to ask for your support, she began. The Kresh are still out there. We cannot face them alone. The alliance that once united us must be restored, or we will all be destroyed. Lucas stood beside her, his hand resting on the symbol on his arm. The future of our worlds is at stake, he said, his voice firm. The past is not just a story, it's a warning. If we do not act now, we will pay the price. The leaders exchanged glances, their eyes narrowing. It was clear that they were not convinced. The room was filled with tension, and for a moment it seemed like their mission might fail. Kayla's face remained calm, but Lucas could see the fear in her eyes. She had risked everything to bring this truth to light, and if the Zorathians rejected them now, they would be left without any allies. Then, one of the council members, a tall Zorathian named Zarek, stepped forward. His voice was cold and calculated. You speak of a bond that has been broken, he said, his eyes narrowing. But how can we trust you, Kayla? You bring a human here and expect us to believe that the past is worth revisiting. Kayla's face hardened, but her voice remained steady. The Kresh are real, Zarek, and if we do not unite, they will destroy us all. You know this. You know the history. Zarek's eyes flickered with something anger. Guilt. It was hard to tell. He glanced around the room, as if seeking approval from the other leaders. After a long pause, he spoke again, his voice low. "And what of the humans? Do you trust them, Kayla? Do you trust that they will stand by us when the time comes?" Lucas felt a chill run down his spine. Zarek's question wasn't just a doubt, it was a challenge. He could feel the weight of the Council's gaze on him. Would they trust Earth? Would they trust him? "I trust that we will fight together," Lucas said, his voice steady. "The Kresh don't care about our differences. They don't care about the past. They only care about one thing, destroying everything in their path. We have to unite, or we will fall one by one." For a moment there was silence. The leaders exchanged glances, their faces unreadable. Then, to Lucas's surprise, Zarek turned to Kayla. "Perhaps you're right," he said, his voice quieter. "Perhaps the past cannot be ignored. But I will not stand by and watch the Zorathians be dragged into a war that we are not ready for. We need time." Kayla's face tightened, but she remained calm. "We don't have time, Zarek. The Kresh will not wait. They are already planning their attack. The alliance must be restored or we will lose everything." Zarek turned sharply, his eyes flashing with something dangerous. "Then perhaps it is time for a new alliance," he said, his voice full of venom. The room erupted into chaos. Zorothian leaders shouted, some in support of Kayla, others siding with Zarek. The debate grew heated, and Lucas could feel the tension rising. He knew something wasn't right, but he couldn't figure out what. The leaders were divided, but this was more than just a difference of opinion. There was something else at play here, something darker. Suddenly, Kayla grabbed Lucas's arm. "We have to go," she whispered urgently. Now, before Lucas could respond, a loud crash echoed through the hall. The doors burst open, and a group of Zorathian soldiers rushed in, weapons drawn. "Arrest them. They are traitors to the Zorothian people." The room froze. Lucas's heart pounded in his chest as the soldiers moved toward them. Kayla's face was a mask of shock and anger, but she didn't hesitate. "We've been betrayed," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "Zarek has been working with the Kresh. He's the one who has been feeding them information." Lucas's mind raced. Betrayal. Zarek had been playing both sides, and now they were trapped. "We have to fight our way out," Kayla said, her eyes fierce. "There's no other choice." Zorathian soldiers blocked their path, but Kayla and Lucas fought back with everything they had. The hall was filled with the sounds of battle blaster fire, shouting, and the crash of metal against metal. As they reached the exit, Lucas looked back at the chaos unfolding behind them. The Zorothian leaders were divided, the alliance was crumbling, and the Kresh were closing in. Their mission had just become far more dangerous. The sound of blaster fire echoed through the halls as Lucas and Kayla rushed toward the back exit. Their hearts pounded in their chests, the chaos of the betrayal still fresh in their minds. The soldiers, loyal to Zarek, were closing in on them, and every second counted. They couldn't afford to be caught now. "Keep moving," Kayla shouted, pulling Lucas along as they ran through the narrow corridors. The walls of the Zorothian hall seemed to close in on them, but they pushed forward. Knowing that their only chance of survival was escape, they turned a corner and found themselves in a darkened hallway, the sounds of battle growing faint. It was quieter here, but Lucas knew that didn't mean they were safe. They needed to find a way off the planet, and fast. "Where do we go now?" Lucas asked, trying to catch his breath. He could feel the weight of their situation pressing down on him. They had just been betrayed by someone they thought they could trust, and now they were on the run. Kayla looked over at him, her expression tense but determined. "There's a Shiphan old Zorothian transport ship. It's hidden in a hangar nearby. We can use it to escape." Lucas nodded. He trusted her. She'd always been one step ahead, even when things seemed hopeless. But this time it was different. They were running out of time, and Zarek wouldn't let them go easily. They pushed forward. Moving quickly through the narrow, dimly lit hallways, the air felt heavy with the tension of the situation. Lucas could hear the distant sounds of the soldiers searching for them, and he knew it wouldn't be long before they found their trail. "We need to move faster," Kayla said, her voice Low and urgent, they reached the hangar door, but it was locked. Kayla cursed under her breath and turned to Lucas. "Get ready," she said. Without another word, she ran toward the control panel on the wall. Buttons, typing in a series of codes. Lucas kept watch, his heart racing as he kept an eye on the corridor. They couldn't afford to be caught here. He didn't know how much longer they had. The door clicked open, and Kayla gestured for him to follow. "Hurry," she said, stepping inside the hangar. Lucas entered quickly, and the sight of the Zorothian transport ship before them gave him a small sense of relief. It wasn't much, just an old, beat-up vessel, but it was their ticket out. Kayla ran to the ship's control panel and started typing in the coordinates. "I'll get the ship ready for takeoff," she said. "You keep watch." Lucas nodded. Moving to the ship's exterior to keep an eye on the entrance to the hangar, his hand instinctively went to the weapon at his side. He wasn't sure what to expect, whether Zarek soldiers were close, or if they had more surprises waiting for them. Minutes passed in tense silence, but nothing happened. Lucas's muscles ached from the constant motion, but he couldn't stop. He needed to be ready for whatever came next. Finally, Kella's voice broke the silence. "It's ready. We're good to go." Lucas moved quickly, rushing into the ship. He took a seat next to Kayla, who was already piloting the ship. The engines roared to life, and the hangar doors began to close behind them. They're almost free. "Hold on," Kayla said as she pushed the throttle forward. The ship shot out of the hangar, the planet's surface growing distant below them. The stars stretched out before them, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Lucas allowed himself to relax. They had escaped, at least for now. But the danger wasn't over. They still had to deal with Zarek and the Zorothian betrayal. "We need to contact Earth," Lucas said, his voice serious. "We need to warn them about what's coming. The Kresh, Zarek, everything." Kayla nodded, her fingers already moving across the ship's controls. "I agree. Earth needs to be ready." She started sending out a distress signal, trying to reach Earth's fleet. But as the ship continued its journey, a warning light flashed on the control panel. "What's wrong?" Lucas asked, his heart racing again. Kella's eyes flicked to the screen. "There's something out there. There's something in our path." Lucas looked out the window and saw a dark shape moving toward them, blocking their way. The shape grew larger as it approached. It wasn't a Zorothian ship, but something much more dangerous. "The Kresh," Kayla whispered, her face pale. "They've found us." The ship lurched as a blast of energy hit them, shaking the entire vessel. Lucas gripped the armrest, his mind racing. They were caught. They weren't alone anymore. The Kresh had found them, and they were now in the fight of their lives. Kayla didn't waste any time. "Get to the weapons," she ordered, her voice sharp. "We're not going down without a fight." Lucas rushed to the weapons station, his hands trembling as he prepared to defend the ship. The Kresh were ruthless, and they wouldn't show mercy. But they couldn't afford to be caught. Not now, not when they were so close to contacting Earth. The battle was about to begin. The battle was fierce. The ship rocked with every blast from the Kresh vessel, and Lucas gripped the weapons controls tightly, his heart pounding. They were outnumbered, and the Kresh were relentless. But Lucas wasn't about to give up. He had a mission to complete, and he wasn't going to let anything stop him. "Kayla, we need a plan," Lucas shouted over the blaring alarms, his voice strained with tension. The Kresh ship was closing in fast, and the ship's shields were beginning to fail. "I'm working on it." Kayla called back from the cockpit, her voice steady but filled with urgency. She had already launched several counterattacks, but the Kresh were good. Too good. "Keep firing," Lucas urged, his hands moving quickly as he adjusted the aim of the ship's weapons. A blast of energy hit the side of the ship, sending a shockwave through the hull. The lights flickered, and the ship groaned under the strain. "We can't hold them off much longer," Kayla said, her voice filled with determination. "We need to find a way to escape." Lucas nodded, his mind racing. The Kresh were too powerful for them to fight head-on, but there had to be a way out. He looked at the control panel, his eyes scanning the nearby stars. Then something caught his attention, a small, uncharted moon in the distance. There, We need to make it to that moon, Lucas said, pointing to the screen. It's our only chance. Kayla didn't hesitate. She turned the ship's controls, steering them toward the moon. The Kresh ship followed closely behind, closing the distance with each passing second. But Kayla wasn't giving up. She pushed the ship's engines to their limits, ship speeding toward the moon's surface. The Kresh ship fired another round of blasts. But Kayla expertly dodged them, narrowly missing each strike. Surface no rocky, with jagged cliffs and deep craters. It was a dangerous place to land, but it was their best hope. Get ready for a rough landing, Kayla said, her hands steady on the controls. We have one shot at this. With a final burst of speed, Kayla brought the ship down onto the moon's surface. The landing was harsh, the ship bouncing violently as it hit the ground, but Kayla managed to land it safely. The ship skidded to a halt, its engines sputtering and groaning. They had made it. We're safe for now, Kayla said, exhaling in relief. But Lucas knew that the Kresh wouldn't stop here. They would be searching for them, and they wouldn't stop until they had finished what they started. They needed to find shelter, a place where they could regroup and plan their next move. We need to find cover, Lucas said, standing up from his seat. We don't know how long we have before they catch up to us. Kayla nodded. There's an ancient temple on this moon. It's not far from here, but we'll have to be careful. The place is rumored to be full of traps and dangers. Then we'll be careful, Lucas said, grabbing his weapon. Let's go. The two of them left the ship, stepping onto the moon's rocky surface. The air was thin and cold, and the sky above was a deep, starry black. The moon's surface was barren, with no signs of life, except for the ruins of an old structure in the distance. It looked like it had once been grand, but now it was crumbling, its walls covered in centuries of dust and decay as they walked. Toward the temple, Lucas kept his eyes open for any signs of danger. The Kresh were relentless, and he knew they wouldn't stop searching until they had found them. The ancient temple was their only hope for safety. When they reached the temple, Kayla pushed open the heavy stone doors. Inside, the air was thick, with dust, and the walls were lined with strange symbols that Lucas didn't recognize. The place felt ancient, as if it had been abandoned for hundreds of years. This is it, Kayla said, her voice echoing in the empty hall. This is where we'll make our stand. Lucas looked around, his eyes scanning the temple's interior. There was an eerie quietness to the place, as if the walls themselves were holding secrets. The air felt heavy, and the sense of danger was palpable, but they couldn't afford to waste time. They needed to find what was hidden here. What are we looking for? Lucas asked. Kayla's eyes brightened. The temple holds the key to defeating the Kresh. It's been passed down through Zorathian legend, a weapon capable of wiping them out. But it's not easy to find. The temple is full of traps, and only those worthy can access its power. Lucas didn't hesitate. We're worthy, he said, his voice steady. We've come this far. Can't stop now. Kayla smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. It's not just about finding the weapon. It's about understanding the truth of the past. Only then can we truly defeat the Kresh. Together, they ventured deeper into the temple, navigating through narrow corridors and avoiding ancient traps. Every step felt like a test, but they were determined. They had to succeed. The fate of both their people depended on it. As they reached the heart of the temple, they found a large stone door. Strange symbols were etched into its surface, and Kayla's eyes widened. This is it, she whispered. This is where the weapon is hidden. With a deep breath, Kayla placed her hand on the stone, and the door began to open. The light from the outside world faded, and Lucas felt the weight of the moment settle over him. They were about to uncover the power that could change everything. Key to defeating the Kresh, the stone door creaked open with a heavy grinding sound, revealing a dimly lit chamber beyond. The air inside was thick with dust, and the faint smell of ancient stone and metal filled Lucas's nose. As he stepped into the chamber, the temperature seemed to drop, and a sense of unease washed over him. Kayla was right behind him, her eyes scanning the room as she moved forward cautiously. This is it, Kayla whispered, her voice filled with awe. This is where the weapon was hidden. Lucas's heart raced. He had no idea what kind of weapon they were about to uncover, but the stakes had never been higher. The Kresh were out there, and they were closing in. They had to find the weapon and get back to their ship, but time was running out. The chamber was large, with walls covered in strange markings and symbols. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, upon which a glowing object rested. The light from the object seemed to pulse with energy, and it radiated a sense of power, unlike anything Lucas had ever felt before. It was the weapon, but it didn't look like anything he had imagined. There were no guns or blades, just a small, spherical object that seemed to hum with energy. Kayla approached the pedestal slowly, her eyes never leaving the object. "This is it," she said, her voice filled with reverence. "This is the power that can defeat the Kresh." Lucas felt a surge of hope. If this was the key to stopping the Kresh, then it was worth everything they had gone through. But something about the object made him uneasy. It was too simple, too small, for something that could change the course of a war. "What exactly does it do?" Lucas asked, his voice uncertain. Kayla hesitated for a moment, then looked at him with a serious expression. "It doesn't just destroy the Kresh. It changes everything. The weapon harnesses the power of the Zorothian alliance with humanity. It can channel the strength of our bond, allowing us to defeat the Kresh once and for all. But it requires both our people to activate it." Lucas nodded. "Let's use it." As Kayla reached out to take the object, a loud noise echoed from outside the temple. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the distant sound of engines grew louder. The Kresh had found them. "We don't have much time," Kayla said, her voice tense. "We need to activate the weapon now." But as she reached for the object, the ground shook violently, and the chamber door slammed shut with a loud bang. The walls began to glow with a red light, and strange mechanical sounds filled the air. It was a trap. "Kayla," Lucas shouted, stepping back. "What's happening?" Kayla's face was pale as she backed away from the pedestal. "This is not just a weapon," she said, her voice filled with fear. "It's a test. Only those worthy of the Zorothian human alliance can activate it. We must prove our bond." Before Lucas could respond, a deep voice echoed through the chamber. It was coming from the walls themselves. "Who dares to claim the power of the alliance?" Lucas looked around, his heart racing. The voice seemed to come from everywhere, and it was impossible to tell where it was coming from. But he knew they didn't have much time to figure it out. Kayla stepped forward, her voice strong. "We are worthy. I, Kayla, Zorothian descendant of the ancient alliance, and Lucas, human soldier chosen to carry the symbol, stand before you." There was a pause, and then the voice spoke again. "Prove your worth." Suddenly, the chamber around them seemed to shift. The walls twisted, and the floor beneath their feet began to rise, forming a set of platforms that stretched up to the ceiling. They were trapped in a maze of floating platforms, each one suspended by an invisible force. "This is it," Kayla said, her eyes determined. "We must face the test together. The weapon will only activate if we prove our strength." As allies, Lucas's mind raced. He had no idea what kind of test they would face, but he knew one thing for sure: he had to trust Kayla. Together, they had already overcome so much. They had fought for their survival, and now they had to fight for their future as they stepped onto the first platform. The walls around them began to glow, and strange symbols appeared on the floor. The platform shifted, moving them forward into the center of the maze. "Stay close," Kayla whispered, her voice steady. "The test is about unity. We must work together, or we'll never make it." Suddenly, the air around them shimmered, and a series of Kresh warriors appeared on the platforms, their weapons raised. They were not real, but projections designed to test their ability to fight as a team. Lucas grabbed his weapon, but Kayla stopped him. "Don't fight them alone," she said. "We need to work together. Use the strength of the alliance."
Lucas
nodded, and together they began to move, fighting side by side. The Kresh warriors were fierce, but Kayla and Lucas fought with precision. They moved in sync, their attacks coordinated as if they had been fighting together for years. Each blow was powerful, and each strike seemed to push them closer to the end of the test. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last Kresh warrior vanished, leaving them standing together on the final platform. The chamber around them was silent, and the glowing symbols on the walls faded away. The voice spoke again. "You have passed the test. The weapon is yours." With a final hum, the object on the pedestal began to glow brightly. It floated toward them, and Kayla reached out, taking it into her hands. The power of the Zorothian Human Alliance was now in their hands. "This is it," Kayla said, her voice filled with triumph. "We can stop the Kresh." Lucas smiled. They had done it. Together, they had proved their worth, and now they had the power to change the future.